A tree trunk split in half under a single fist. Bark exploded outward. Splinters buried themselves in the snow. The man standing over it didn't flinch. He didn't look at the blood running down his knuckles. He just stood there, breathing hard, staring at nothing. His chest was covered in scars. Claw marks, bite wounds, the kind of damage that should have killed him. He was massive, built for war, the kind of size that only comes from surviving what no one should survive. He hadn't spoken to another living soul in 3 years. Hadn't wanted to. His name was Kale, the broken Alpha King, once the most feared ruler the Shifter clans had ever known. Now a man alone in the snow, bleeding from his own fist, wanting nothing from the world but silence. What happens when the world refuses to give it? Stay with me on this one. Now here's the thing about Kale. He wasn't born broken. That's important to understand. He was built, piece by piece, into something the Shifter world had never seen before. An alpha who could hold 6 packs under one rule. Not through fear alone. Through judgment. Through presence. When Kale walked into a territory dispute, he didn't need to fight. He just stood there, looked at both sides, and something in his eyes, something ancient and absolute, made grown wolves lower their heads and step back. He had a mate, Sarah, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on her, because Kale wouldn't want me to. But you need to know this much. She was the only living thing that could make him laugh. Not smile, laugh. The kind of sound that made his lieutenants exchange glances because they didn't think he was capable of it. She was small, fast, clever in ways he wasn't. She balanced him. She kept the blade from getting too sharp. And then came the war. The Northern Reach conflict. That's what the clans called it afterward. Like giving it a proper name made it easier to stomach. 3 rival packs coordinated an ambush. They hit Kale's stronghold at dawn, when the sentries were changing. It was surgical, brutal, over in 40 minutes. Kale survived because he was Kale. He killed 11 wolves that morning. Took wounds that would have dropped any other alpha twice over. But when the blood settled and the smoke cleared, he found Sarah in the courtyard. She wasn't moving. She wasn't going to move again. That was 3 years ago. After that, Kale did something no Alpha King had ever done. He walked away, didn't pass the crown, didn't name a successor, didn't burn the stronghold or make a speech. He just turned his back on every living wolf who owed him loyalty and disappeared into the deep wild. The kind of land no pack claims because there's no reason to. Rocky, cold, empty. He built a shelter from fallen timber. Not a home, a shelter. There's a difference. A home has warmth in it, a reason to come back. Kale's shelter had 4 walls and a place to sleep. That's all he wanted. He ate what he caught. Drank from the stream. He didn't shift anymore. Hadn't taken his wolf form since the morning Sarah died. That part of him felt like a room he'd locked and thrown away the key to. The wolf was the Alpha King. The man was just a man. And the man wanted to be left alone. The other packs respected it. Or feared it. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. They gave his territory a wide circle. Word spread through the clans the way it always does. Whispers at borders. Stories told to pups as warnings. Don't go north. Don't cross the frozen river. The broken king lives there. And he doesn't want company. For 3 years the system worked. Nobody came. Nobody called. The silence was so thick you could lean against it. Kale woke up. Survived the day. Went to sleep. Woke up again. He stopped counting the days. There was no reason to count them. Each one was the same as the last. Hunt. Eat. Stare at the fire. Sleep. Repeat. Some nights, the wind would shift and carry a howl from a distant pack. A call to gather. A mating cry. A warning. Normal wolf sounds. Normal life happening somewhere far away. Kale would sit and listen until it faded, then go back to his silence. He didn't miss it. That's what he told himself, anyway. He kept Sarah's thong on a cord around his neck. That was the only thing from his old life he hadn't left behind. He'd hold it sometimes, late at night, rubbing the smooth surface with his thumb until his hand went still and sleep took him. And then, on a morning so cold the air itself seemed to crack, he heard something he hadn't heard in 3 years. Footsteps. Not animal. Not human. Shifter. He smelled them before he saw them. For wolves in human form, moving through the tree line about 200 yards east. They were injured. He could smell the blood from where he stood. And they were carrying something. Cale didn't move from his doorway. He just watched. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. They came into the clearing one at a time. 3 males and a female. Young. Mid-20s, maybe. They looked like they'd been running for days. Torn clothing. Open wounds on their arms and legs. The female had a gash across her forehead that was still bleeding. They were scared. Not of the cold. Not of the distance they'd covered. Scared of something behind them. And in her arms, wrapped in what looked like a torn blanket, was a child. Small. Couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. The child's head was tucked against the female's shoulder, face hidden. Not crying. Not making any sound at all. Cale said one word. Leave. The lead male stepped forward. He was shaking. Not from the cold. From fear. He knew exactly who he was standing in front of. Alpha King. I'm not that. Leave. Please. You need to turn around and walk back the way you came. The male dropped to one knee. The others followed. Old protocol. The kind of submission you show a king, not a stranger. We're from the Blackshore Pack. What's left of it. We were hit 4 days ago. A massacre. The whole settlement. We're the only ones who got out. Cale's expression didn't change. That's not my problem. We're not asking for shelter, the male said. We're not asking for alliance. We're asking you to take the child. The female stepped forward and lowered the bundle. The blanket fell away and Cale saw the girl's face for the first time. She was pale, thin, dark hair matted against her forehead, and her eyes were open, golden, not amber, not brown, pure gold, like sunlight through honey. Cale felt something shift inside his chest, something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He crushed it immediately. She's not mine. She's not my kind. I don't take strays. She's not ours either, the male said. We found her in the wreckage after the attack. She was sitting in the ash. Not a scratch on her. The whole settlement was destroyed. Everything burning. And she was just sitting there. Not crying. Not hurt. Just sitting in the middle of it all like the fire couldn't touch her. The female spoke for the first time. Her voice was raw. She doesn't speak. Hasn't said a single word since we found her. And her scent. Alpha. Her scent doesn't match any known bloodline. We've carried dozens of pups. We know how a shifter child smells. This girl is something else. Something is hunting her, the male added. Whatever hit Blackshore, it wasn't after territory. It wasn't after power. It was after her. We've been tracked every mile since we left. Every night we hear something in the trees. Something big. If we keep her, we die. All of us. So you bring her to me. You're the only one strong enough. Cale stared at the child. She stared back. No fear. No pleading. Just those golden eyes locked on his face like she was reading something written on his bones. Take her and go. Both of you. But the male was already stepping backward. So was the female. She set the child down in the snow like she was placing an offering on an altar. The girl didn't cry, didn't reach for them. She just stood there in the snow in bare feet, looking up at Cale. We're sorry, the female whispered. And then they were gone. All 4 of them, back into the trees. The sound of their footsteps faded in seconds. Cale stood in his doorway and looked down at the girl. The girl looked up at him. Neither of them moved. He told himself this was nothing. Problem with a simple solution. He'd leave her, walk inside, close the door, She'd wander off eventually, find another pack, find someone who still had something left inside them to give. He went inside, closed the door, sat down on the floor with his back against the wall and waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. An hour. He opened the door. She was still standing there. Same spot, bare feet in the snow. Not shivering, not crying, just standing. Believe me, he tried to walk away from it. He tried 3 more times that day. Each time he shut the door, she stayed. Each time he opened it, she was there. Same spot, same golden eyes, watching him like she already knew something he hadn't figured out yet. By nightfall, the temperature dropped hard. Even a shifter child would feel it eventually. Cale built a fire inside his shelter, left the door open, didn't say a word. She walked in on her own, sat down by the fire, tucked her knees to her chest and watched the flames. After a while, she lay down on the bare floor and closed her eyes. Cale sat on the opposite side of the fire and watched her sleep. She was so small. Her breathing was steady, calm, like she'd decided this was where she belonged and the matter was settled. He told himself this was temporary. One night, he'd figure out what to do with her in the morning. Send word to one of the southern packs. Find someone who actually wanted a child. Someone who still had a heart that worked. He leaned back against the wall. The fire crackled. The girl slept. For the first time in 3 years, the shelter didn't feel empty. Felt worse than empty. Felt like something was starting. Cale woke to silence. Not the usual silence. A different kind. The kind that presses against your eardrums. He was on his feet before his eyes were fully open. The fire had burned down to coals. The girl was still sleeping by the ash. But outside something had changed. He stepped into the pre-dawn dark and saw them immediately. Claw marks, deep ones, gouged into the frozen earth in a wide circle around his shelter. Each mark was the length of his forearm. Whatever made them had walked his perimeter while he slept, circled the whole structure, tested the ground, and left. Now here's the thing. Cale had seen every predator the shifter world had to offer. Bears, cats, wolves 3 times the normal size. Nothing left marks like these. These claws belonged to something old. Something that shouldn't exist anymore. Something from the stories the elders used to tell before the firelight. The ones that made even grown alphas go quiet. This wasn't about a lost child anymore. This was about what was coming for her. He went back inside. The girl was awake now, sitting up. Those golden eyes caught the last glow of the coals, and for just a second, they didn't just reflect the light. They produced it. A soft, warm pulse. Like something inside her was answering a call he couldn't hear. Cale crouched in front of her. "What are you?" She didn't answer, just looked at him. Then she did something that broke through every wall he'd spent 3 years building. She reached out and put her small hand flat against his chest. Right over the deepest scar. The one Sarah used to touch when she thought he was sleeping. His breath stopped. His whole body went rigid. And somewhere deep inside him, in the locked room where the wolf lived, something stirred. Not gently. It slammed against the walls like it had been woken by a gunshot. He pulled her hand away, stood up, walked outside, breathed. Okay, new plan. This wasn't a stray child. This was a target. And whatever was tracking her was close, ancient, and patient. The smart move was to carry her south, drop her at the nearest pack border, and disappear. Let someone else deal with it. But he already knew he wasn't going to do that. And that scared him more than the claw marks. He spent the morning fortifying, dragged timber from the ridge, reinforced the walls, set trip lines made from stripped bark and animal bone. Primitive but effective against anything with weight. The girl followed him everywhere. Not underfoot, just present. Like a shadow that had decided to attach itself to him permanently. She helped in her way. Carried sticks that were too small to matter. Stacked pebbles by the door like she was building her own fortification. Cale watched her from the corner of his eye and felt something shift in his chest. Something warm and terrifying. By midday, he'd made a decision he didn't want to make. He needed information, which meant he needed to talk to someone, which meant breaking 3 years of silence. If you've been with me this far, you know this story isn't going where you expected. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see what happens next. There was an old wolf named Drace who lived 2 valleys east. Not a pack wolf. A loner. A keeper of histories. The kind of shifter who remembered things other wolves had been told to forget. If anyone knew what left claw marks that size, it would be Drace. Cale wrapped the girl in a deer hide and carried her. She weighed almost nothing. Her arms went around his neck without hesitation, like she'd been carried by him 1,000 times before. He hated how natural it felt. The walk took 4 hours. Drace's cave was deep in a granite cliff, hidden behind a frozen waterfall. Cale hadn't been there since before the war. Since before everything. Drace was older now. His hair had gone completely white. His eyes were milky at the edges. But when he saw Cale standing at his cave mouth with a child on his hip, those cloudy eyes went sharp. "No," Drace said. "I haven't asked anything yet." "You don't need to. I can smell her from here." Drace backed up a step. Actually backed up. Cale had never seen the old wolf show fear. "Do you know what you're carrying?" "That's what I came to find out." Drace looked at the girl. She looked back at him with those golden eyes. Drace's hands started shaking. "She's a first blood," Drace whispered. "The last one. Do you understand what that means?" The first bloods were the original line. Before the packs. Before the clans. Before the hierarchy. They were the source. The root of every shifter bloodline that exists today. We all come from them. Their blood is what gave us the ability to shift, to heal, to bond. Everything we are traces back to them. And they were hunted to extinction 800 years ago. Or so we thought. Cale looked down at the girl. She was playing with a loose thread on his collar. Hunted by what? By the hollow. The old ones. Shifters who evolved past their animal forms into something else. Something wrong. They stopped shifting into wolves. They shifted into hunger. Pure hunger in a body. They feed on bloodline power. The purer the blood, the stronger the feed. And there is no blood purer than a first blood's. Drace's voice dropped. If a hollow consumes her, it doesn't just kill her. It gains access to the root bloodline. Every shifter alive becomes connected to it. Controllable. Enslaved. Every wolf. Every pack. Every alpha. Puppets. The weight of that settled over Cale. This wasn't a child he was holding. This was a key. A key to every wolf alive. How many hollows are there? One survived. That's the story. One survived the purge. And it's been waiting. 800 years of waiting for a first blood to surface. And now one has. Cale looked at the girl. She'd stopped playing with his collar. She was watching his face. Reading him. And then she did something she hadn't done since the Blackshore wolves left her in the snow. She smiled. It was small. Just a flicker across her mouth. But it hit Cale in a way he didn't expect. Because it wasn't the smile of a child who didn't understand danger. It was the smile of someone who had chosen her protector and was certain she'd chosen well. Cale felt the locked door inside him crack. Not open, but crack. And through that crack, the wolf pressed its face and breathed. He left Drace's cave with the girl on his hip and a name burning in his head. The Hollow. One ancient predator. Patient, powerful, and coming. That night, he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He set a watch. Sat outside his shelter with his back against the wall while the girl slept inside. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. And in the deep dark between the trees, something was breathing. He could hear it. Slow. Deliberate. The breath of something that had been alive for centuries and had learned how to wait. Cale didn't sleep. At dawn, the claw marks were back. Closer this time. 3 feet from the shelter wall. The hollow came on the third night. Cale heard it before he saw it. A sound like bones grinding together. A clicking, wet noise that came from the tree line to the north. The girl was inside. She'd woken up the moment the sound started. She was sitting upright, golden eyes glowing bright enough to cast shadows on the wall. Then it stepped out of the trees. Believe me when I tell you, Cale had faced everything the shifter world could throw at a man. Alphas twice his size, coordinated ambushes, killing fields soaked in blood. None of it prepared him for this. The hollow was tall, 9 feet, maybe 10. His body was wrong. Elongated limbs that bent at too many joints. Skin the color of wet stone, stretched tight over a frame that looked like it had been put together by something that almost remembered what a wolf was supposed to look like. His face was the worst part. It had features, eyes, a mouth, but they were arranged just slightly off. And it was fast. That was the thing about ancient predators. They don't lumber. They don't stalk slowly. They move like lightning trapped in a body. Came at the shelter wall. Cale met it at the door. The collision shook the ground. Cale caught its first strike with both forearms and felt his bones scream. The force drove him back 3 feet, his boots carving trenches in the frozen dirt. The hollow swung again, and again. Each hit was heavier than the last, each strike carrying 800 years of hunger behind it. Cale fought the way he'd always fought, controlled, precise, looking for openings, measuring distance, keeping his body between the creature and the doorway. But he was losing ground. In human form, he wasn't strong enough. Not for this. The hollow caught him across the chest. Its claws opened 4 parallel lines from his shoulder to his hip. Cale hit the ground hard, tasted blood, felt the cold earth against his back. The creature stepped over him, toward the door, toward the girl. And that was when the locked room inside Cale didn't just crack. It shattered. The shift hit him like an explosion. 3 years of suppressed instinct, 3 years of refusing to be what he was, all of it detonated at once. His bones broke and reformed in the span of a heartbeat. His skin split, his jaw stretched, his spine curved and lengthened, and his hands became paws that sank into the frozen earth like anchors. The wolf that stood where Cale had fallen was massive, black as coal, eyes like blue fire, and it was angry, not defensive, not protective, furious. The kind of rage that doesn't come from pain, comes from purpose. He hit the hollow mid-stride. His jaws closed around its arm, and he felt the ancient bone crack under the pressure. The creature screamed. Not a roar, a scream, high and thin and wrong. It tried to pull free, and Cale held on, dragging it away from the shelter, away from the door, away from the girl. They fought in the snow for what felt like hours. It was probably minutes. The hollow was strong, but it was fighting a different Cale now. Not the broken man who punched trees and slept on bare floors. The Alpha King. The wolf who had held 6 packs under one rule. The one thing in the shifter world that even ancient predators should have known better than to corner. The hollow tried to run. That's how Cale knew he was winning. The thing that had hunted for 8 centuries, that had waited with the patience of stone, tried to break away and flee into the trees. Cale didn't let it. He cut off every escape route, drove it back, cornered it against a granite ridge where the rock wall met the tree line. The creature turned and fought with everything it had left. His claws found Cale's ribs, his flank, his shoulder. Each wound burned like acid, but the pain didn't slow him. It sharpened him. Cale drove it into the rock, took wounds that would leave new scars on top of old ones, gave back worse. He found the creature's throat and closed his jaws and didn't let go until the struggling stopped. The body went limp. The ancient skin turned gray, then black, then crumbled. 800 years of stolen time catching up in seconds. The hollow was gone. When it was over, Cale stood in the snow, breathing hard, blood dripping from wounds he couldn't count. He shifted back to human form slowly, painfully. The wolf didn't want to go back in the room. But Kale wasn't locking it away this time. The door stayed open. He walked back to the shelter. The girl was standing in the doorway, golden eyes wide, glowing. She ran to him, bare feet in the snow, arms out. She hit his legs at full speed and wrapped herself around him so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his shin. He stood there for a long time, blood running down his chest, snow falling around them, the forest slowly coming back to life as the birds remembered it was safe to sing. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He knelt down, put his arms around her, and held on. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. She pressed her face against his neck and he felt her breath, warm and steady, against his skin. And in that breath, he heard something he thought he'd never hear again. A reason to wake up tomorrow. The days after the hollow fell were quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the dead silence of a man hiding from the world. The living quiet of a man who had something to protect. Kale cleaned the shelter. Actually cleaned it. Patched the walls where the hollow's claws had torn through. Built a second sleeping platform, smaller, raised off the cold floor. He lined it with deer hide and pine needles until it was soft enough for a child. He caught extra game. Smoked the meat so there would be enough for 2. Small changes, but each one felt enormous. Each one was an admission that this wasn't temporary anymore. The girl watched him work. She still didn't speak, but she communicated. A tug on his hand when she was hungry, a press of her head against his arm when she was tired, a small, golden flash of her eyes when something amused her. She was learning him the same way he was learning her. Slowly, through presence. Through the small, daily acts of being alive next to another person. He started calling her Ember. Not because she'd told him her name. She hadn't told him anything. But on the 4th morning after the fight, she was sitting by the fire and a stray spark landed on her hand. She didn't flinch. She cupped it in her palm and watched it glow. And for a moment her golden eyes matched the spark perfectly. Ember. To fit. Word traveled the way it always does in the shifter world. Whispers at pack borders. A story passed from runner to runner. The broken Alpha King killed a hollow with his bare jaws. He's not alone anymore. He's got a child. A golden-eyed girl. A first blood. The first visitors came 2 weeks later. A mated pair from the southern ridge pack. They brought dried meat and a pair of small boots they'd made from rabbit hide. They didn't ask to stay. Didn't ask for alliance. They just set the gifts on the ground outside the shelter and dipped their heads. Kale stood in the doorway and watched them leave. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't tell them to leave either. And that was something. For a man who'd spent 3 years snarling at the world, simply standing still and letting someone be kind was an act of surrender. More came. A healer from the Ashfall clan who cleaned Kale's wounds properly for the first time and left herbs for the girl. A young scout from Black Shore. One of the survivors. He told Kale that the 4 wolves who'd brought Ember were safe. They'd found shelter with a coastal pack. They were alive because of what Kale had done. Kale didn't know what to do with that. Gratitude felt foreign. Like a language he used to speak but had forgotten the shape of. Drace came once. Stood at the edge of the clearing and watched Ember playing with a stick in the snow, swinging it like a sword. The old wolf shook his head slowly. "You know what she'll become," Drace said. "When she grows, when her power matures, she'll be the most important wolf alive. Every pack will want her. Every alpha will try to claim her." "Let them try," Kale said. Drace looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the first time Kale had seen the old wolf smile in years. "There he is," Drace said quietly. "The king." "I'm not a king." "No, you're something better. You're a father." But Ember knew. Every time a visitor came, she stood a little taller, watched a little more carefully. And when they left, she'd look up at Kale with those golden eyes and something in her expression said, "See, you're not alone. You never were. You just forgot." One evening, about a month after the hollow, Kale sat outside while Ember slept. The sky was clear, stars everywhere. He could hear the stream running under its skin of ice. The wind moved through the pines. He reached into his collar and pulled out the cord he'd worn for 3 years. Sarah's thong. The one she'd lost in her first shift as a teenager. She'd kept it as a joke. A reminder of who she was before she became graceful. He'd worn it every day since the morning he'd found her in the courtyard. He held it in his palm, closed his fingers around it. He didn't talk to her. He wasn't that kind of man. But he thought something, and if Sarah was out there in whatever comes after, she heard it. I found something worth protecting again. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm not letting go. He tucked the thong back under his collar. Inside, Ember made a small sound in her sleep. Not a word. A sigh. The kind of sound a child makes when they're deep in a dream and they feel safe enough to stay there. Kale stood up, went inside, pulled the deer hide up to her chin. She shifted in her sleep and her hand found his wrist. Small fingers, warm. She held on even while dreaming. He didn't pull away. He sat down by the door, set his back against the wall and kept watch. The same way he'd done every night since the hollow came. But it was different now. He wasn't watching for threats. He was watching over someone. This is where it turns. Not with a battle or a revelation. It turns with a man sitting in a doorway, choosing to stay awake so a child can sleep. That's the whole story. Not the king he was, the father she made him. The broken alpha king wanted silence. The world sent him something louder. A small girl with golden eyes who never said a word. And somehow she said everything.